The views and opinions expressed in this program are not meant to alarm anyone, but merely start an intelligent discussion about an interesting phenomenon. The possibility that an intelligent life form does exist and is actively making contact with the Earth.
Since 1947, over 2,000 cases of UFOs have been confirmed on the radar. Tonight we're going to discuss 3 of those cases in great detail. So stay tuned tonight as we present UFO radar contact on UFO Update Live. Hello, my name is Jerry Black and welcome back to UFO Update Live. Remember, this is your show, so give us a call at 651-1221 with your questions on our topic tonight or any question you might have about UFOs. I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce our panel. Brian Scow, I want to thank you for being here this evening. Brian Scow is working towards his physics degree. He's also done a great deal of work on freedom of information material in the last 2 months, which obviously is a monumental task. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Pat Packard, of course, he's the Assistant State Director for the Mutual UFO Network, also the president and founder of his own group, ASK, Associates for Scientific Knowledge. And we thank you for being here, Pat.
Thanks, Jerry.
And last on this couch here, we've got Terry Endres. Terry Endres is a workaholic. He's a full-time teacher. He also heads our newsletter that we have out and has done a tremendous job on that. He's an accomplished writer and just an all-around great guy. We appreciate you being here, Terry.
I appreciate being here.
And of course, my wife, Peggy Black, she's a UFO investigator and researcher for 17 years. She's a member of the Center of UFO Studies, and she also has founded herself a UFO support group, the only group in the tri-state area lending support to people who have had UFO sightings. Panel, I can't emphasize enough to the people out there how important it is, this show tonight concerning radar, because radar is probably our closest link to proving to people that UFOs are not from this planet. Whether they're from another dimension or whatever else, we don't know. But radar has been a big instrument in helping us prove that these objects couldn't come from this planet. Right now, I want to take the opportunity to show you a clip that Bob and Pat and Terry did at the Greater Cincinnati Airport in conjunction with this show, trying to show you and get some information for you on the radar situation. So if we can roll that clip now and give our audience and ourselves a better view of radar, I would appreciate it.
Camera 3168, advise airport in sight.
G-man opening with 8.
Camera 3168, reduce speed to 180, cleared visual approach, runway 18 right.
Radar system is divided really into 2 parts. We have primary radar, which detects, for lack of a better term, just the flight of an aircraft, the movement, it's very, very raw data that you get from primary radar. There's also what's known as secondary radar, which is more of a computerized type system that each aircraft would provide a 4-digit code back to the radar system, and that system would then identify the airplane using that code. Radar will detect, once again, using the primary system, it'll detect aircraft whether or not they are providing us a code. It would detect the movement of the aircraft. Also, radar can detect, vehicles on the ground if it's set up in a fashion to do that.
Okay.
In the air, there's, in today's environment, you got ultralight type vehicles, which are really not along the lines of aircraft, but could be detected by radar if they were in close enough to the airport to be able to be picked up, and also at a high enough altitude to be able to be picked up. And those particular types of craft can, they can do all sorts of gyrations and move in all kinds of different directions, and that could be something that could be picked up. Hot air balloons, you know, those types of vehicles. While we wouldn't pick them up necessarily as aircraft, if they were airborne, we would know that they were there because of the movement we'd be getting.
How about things like flocks of birds or...
Oh, sure. Yeah, we, this time of year especially, when we got a lot of the bird movement to the south, yeah, we'll pick that up. And it's, it'll appear as a weather area on radar because it's just this movement of something. And flocks of birds are very frequently found to be on radar, as well as movement of clouds, weather areas, precipitation.
Sure.
All of this gets picked up. In my experience, the things that have come up that would seem a little bit strange or out of the ordinary are always explainable in some shape, form, or fashion. For example, if you've got the radar set up in such a fashion that you're picking up ground clutter and things of this nature, you can pick up trucks that are out on the highway that may be making going down the road making a sharp turn, which would appear on the radar to be something really extraordinary. Yet it's very easily explainable as just a truck out on the highway.
Right.
Once again, the false targets. If you know, most radar controllers know what they are. They're trained to identify that, but if someone is not that familiar, they could think that that's something unusual because a false target will typically go to a point and disappear. So that would give you some sort of a feeling that maybe this is something unusual, when in fact it's very explainable. Sightings that I can personally speak to are the type of things that you might at night, you know, in an environment where you're in a control tower and the lights are out and it's dark. You see things in the sky that are explainable. I've known on a couple of 3 occasions where you'd see a bright light off in the distance that really doesn't seem to be moving, seems to be stationary, and can create a lot of questions in your mind. Later on, you find out that it's a weather balloon that's got a reflection, and you'll get pilots reporting seeing it, and you'll get people on the ground seeing it, when in fact it's just a weather balloon. So once again, there's many things out there, but I don't know of anything personally that hadn't been explained.
If a aircraft or an image appears on a screen that does something dramatically different from that of the average or normal aircraft motion, instead of here, 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 and here, it goes here, here, and here, and here. That means it immediately reversed direction within a time frame that would not have permitted an aircraft in that at that speed to make a direct reversal on the flight of path. Or if it would be appear here and then clear across the screen, which would mean within a particular time frame, whatever caused this blip obviously caused that one because there's nothing else on the screen. If they're led to believe that, that means that its speed then would have to be significant.
Right. Welcome back to UFO Update. Peggy, I understand you have a few questions to ask our panel here of gentlemen about the situation at Greater Cincinnati Airport. So go ahead with your questions.
Pat, what do they do to keep from misidentifying radar targets?
Well, first of all, Peggy, as was said on the tape by Mr. Goswick, they're capable and trained to identify any type of false echo or whatever may occur. But when they sit down at the radar, they have a complete checklist they go through to make sure all the settings are the way they should be, so that those things don't occur. And believe me, after having been out there and seen how professional these fellows are and how they work, it would be highly unlikely that they would make any mistakes like that. And in fact, the cases that we're going to talk about tonight, there's no question that the radar operators did their job correctly. But one thing I do want to say before we go any further is Wayne Goswick and Doug Sweeten, Mr. Timmerman, were all extremely helpful and very gracious. They went way out of their way, especially out at Cincinnati Airport, to answer all our questions and to take us around the whole facility, and I can't say enough about that. I do want to say, and I want to reiterate, they've got a lot of experience, and they, in their years of experience, I think Doug Sweden has around 35 years of experience. They've never encountered anything unusual. This is kind of a rare phenomenon. But in fact, if it did happen, they would be able to identify it.
Could you tell us what improvements they've made with radar over the past 40 years?
Well, since the 50s, radar really hasn't changed very much. The basic unit is the same. You know, radar signals go out, radio signals, they bounce off an object. The object's what they call painted, and they can tell whether it's a solid object or whatever. But there have been other, I guess, bells and whistles that they've put on it to, I guess, eliminate ground clutter and to eliminate other, give them a better view of objects on the scope, more definition. Really, that's about it, really.
Terry, about false echoes, what could you tell us about them?
Well, as Mr. Goswick had mentioned, a number of things can find their ways onto the screen, including even moving objects on the ground. But probably the most common problem with false echoes has something to do with what's called a temperature inversion. And if we can get a close-up on this graphic here, I'll try to explain what happens. Typically what happens with a temperature inversion is that a layer of warm air is sandwiched between two layers of cooler air. Now there are not only differences in the temperatures between these masses, but also the density. So what happens is that if you're making a visual sighting, the object is here, and the light that is either reflected or coming from it is bent by that layer in between those other two masses, so that the observer on the ground sees it displaced in this line of vision. So clearly, you can see how a mirage effect is generated. In fact, what could happen, maybe at night, is that someone could see the lights of an airplane before the airplane actually arrives on the scene. And that once that airplane goes through the temperature inversion, the false image might blink out, and it may appear to have been followed by the airplane. Now, this same kind of thing happens to radar. We're talking about a slightly different arrangement of signals, but the return echo, if it has to pass through a temperature inversion, will in fact be bent and will displace the object on the radar screen. So it is quite possible that a false image will appear on a radar screen in the same manner. But as we had learned at the FAA facility, the false target is quite a bit different in its quality. It's not nearly as sharp or well-defined as a solid object. So most of, and if not all, trained radar observers will be able to distinguish the false target from the genuine.
If an object's seen on more than one radar, what's the chances of it being a mistake?
Well, actually that increases the chances that you've got a solid object, because most temperature inversions are rather local events. So that if you have one radar picking up a temperature inversion and you have another radar maybe 50 miles off, it won't pick up that same temperature inversion. So if the targets are on both sets of radar, well then you've got a pretty good chance that something solid and is being tracked. And the more radar systems you have tied into that same target, the higher the probability that you're dealing with a physical object. And just to comment again on weather inversions, why this is kind of important, in 1952 there was a radar visual case over 2 weekends in Washington, D.C., and the official explanation that came from the Air Force was that this was due to a weather inversion. However, as you'll see in this tape, that may not be the answer.
There were radar reports of unidentified flying objects over the nation's capital. We had 3 reports. One came from Andrews Air Force Base Radar Control Room, and 2 from the radar controls at Washington National Airport. The first sightings consisted of a number of unidentified targets picked up on radar. Then a call was placed from National to the Andrews Air Force Base flight controllers. They were apparently tracking the same targets.
Then Andrews reported a visual observation of 3 objects that were apparently in the same position as those indicated by our radar sets. The target stayed on radar until about 12:30 a.m. They moved slowly at first, about 100 to 200 miles per hour. Then one of the targets sped away at a fantastic rate of speed. It moved west from Andrews toward Riverdale.
Army 142.
The estimated speed was 7,300 miles per hour. At this time, in the tower, we had about 7 targets on the radar scope. These unidentified objects were flying all over the city. They even violated the restricted air corridors here over the White House and over the Capitol building. I was awakened the following Saturday night around midnight by a telephone call to my home in Virginia. It was the public information officer for the Federal Aviation Authority. He told me the air traffic control radars were again picking up a large number of UFOs over the Capitol area. First they would follow a definite flight path, and then they would suddenly disappear. Others would come into view just as suddenly. I placed the phone call to the command post in the Pentagon, and I asked for an intercept. About 2:40 a.m., we got a radio call from a flight of F-94s, 2 aircraft in the flight. They also, at about that moment, appeared on our scope. And at that moment, a very frightening thing happened to us. All of our unknown traffic completely disappeared the moment those aircraft came on the scope. The flight leader called in and said, well, it doesn't look like we're going to do any good here, so we're going to go back to base. And at that very moment, those aircraft disappeared. All of our unknown traffic appeared again on our scope. And again, it was a very frightening experience. We called Andrews Air Force Base, and they reported exactly the same thing happened to their scope.
The Washington Daily News published an interview with Harry G. Barnes, Senior Air Traffic Controller, Civil Aeronautics Administration. Barnes stated, "There is no other conclusion I can reach but that for 6 hours on the morning of the 20th of July, there were at least 10 unidentifiable objects moving above Washington. They were not ordinary aircraft. I could tell that by their movement on the scope. I can safely deduce that they performed gyrations which no known aircraft could perform. By this I mean that our scope showed that they could make right-angle turns and complete reversals of flight. Nor, in my opinion, could any natural phenomena account for these spots on our radar."
Welcome back to UFO Update. Terry, this idea of temperature inversion, you heard what Mr. Barnes had to say. I mean, and you were over at the airport.
Right.
Wouldn't that be almost ridiculous to assume that a gentleman of Mr. Barnes' caliber, some 30 years of experience as an air traffic controller and supervisor, that he would mistake that?
Oh yeah. In fact, we were assured by the folks down at the airport that the training that these fellows get should eliminate the possibility that they would identify something that with such a degree of error. But the interesting thing is that notice the speed this thing was traveling at, 7,300 miles an hour. That's quite a clip, and the problem is if you're trying to describe that as a temperature inversion, the temperature inversion won't do anything more than the actual target, because again, it's like a mirror image, a mirage. Now, it's not going to move any differently than the actual solid object, though it's a false echo. It's not going to move. About the only thing it can do is just disappear from the screen as the solid object gets through that temperature inversion, and then all you have is that one target. But this idea that a temperature inversion can be clocked at 7,300 miles an hour is a bit bizarre. In fact, the inversion itself is simply an air layer, and its own speed is determined by the wind at the time. So clearly, the wind hopefully never blows at 7,300 miles an hour, because there wouldn't be a whole lot left to your airport if that happened.
Did they advise you at the airport how temperature inversion appears on a screen? In other words, I had been told by one gentleman, because it's a layer of cold air upon hot air, that it would be like a long, thin situation. Is that correct?
Yeah, because again, the thing that really creates the illusion is the density, the difference in density, and the fact that as your signal is being bent, it's also being spread out. Okay, it's being sort of taken apart, so that when it hits the receiver and the image is transferred to the screen, it's going to be larger, more diffuse. It's not going to look at all like a typical aircraft target. So, you know, it's pretty easy for the radar controller to identify that as a weather inversion.
What most people may not be aware is that the Air Force held its biggest press conference ever after the second sighting on, I believe, July 26th.
Right.
And out of that came the temperature inversion situation, which I think most of the panel here feels was just to quiet the public, because there was headlines throughout the world on this situation when it actually happened, obviously because of the objects being over the Capitol building.
Right.
We saw what happened the other day when one airplane got into the area.
Right.
Now imagine you've got 10 craft, which is roughly, I think is what it was, 10 craft at one time or more, hovering over the White House area.
Right.
And we can literally do nothing about it.
Right.
When the jets came in, the UFOs left. When the jets disappeared, the UFOs came back on.
True.
So I think it was a frightening experience for the Air Force, and they really, and the government, and they just didn't know what to do. Pat, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no doubt there was a frightening experience. I think he even comments on that in the tape, that they were very much shaken by it. But this whole idea, as he said, of temperature inversions, and they've used it repeatedly to basically buffalo the public, you know, or as they've said, weather balloons or other things, when in fact we know the weather balloon can't travel at those type of speeds either. And most of the prosaic explanations they try to give to us just are totally ridiculous on the face of it. And you know, one of the things that's interesting about this case is that we have not only multiple radar sightings, and really, as Terry said earlier, the chance is, well, really the chance is nil, basically, that 3 radars, which is what happened in this case, would pick up the same objects. But we also had ground sighting by people, I think it was Andrews Air Force Base, and we had sightings by people in the air. Also, the objects disappeared as soon as the jets showed up. That's something we've seen commonly in these cases through the years. Repeatedly, when the jets come, they either stay right out of range. It happens in a case we're going to talk about later tonight, a couple of cases actually, and it just doesn't make any sense. It defies the logic in every sense of the word. We don't have anything today that can go at 7,300 miles an hour, yet in the cases we have here, we're going to have a couple others that traveled at over 7,000 miles an hour. In Belgium, we're not sure what it was, but we know that it traveled, in fact, faster than any aircraft that they had and just completely outstripped them. And, you know, we've had some amazing radar cases, cases where there are 3 airplanes lined up in a row. In fact, an FAA instructor's in the first one, 2 commercial jets and a National Guard airplane, and there's multiple witnesses, multiple radars. And this has happened repeatedly through the years. And we continue to get this, I don't know what to politely call it, explanation. To me, I can't see why the critics and the skeptics won't accept this and look into it any further. I mean, we have, this is just one small area of scientific proof. We have electromagnetic cases, we have people that have been burnt by these things, we have ground trace cases, we have governments like the French government and that have come out and said, hey, this is totally unexplainable, nothing conventional could do this. And you know, there's just a long list. We've had Hess-Dalen scientific experiments that prove the existence of it, yet we still have to fight with people to prove that there's something here. You know, you still get that laughing attitude.
Isn't it important here that not only the sighting itself over the Capitol building, which is a restricted area as everyone knows, but there has to be some kind of intelligence behind these objects because they're disappearing as the jets come into the area. So it's not like we're saying that, okay, these are solid structured objects, but they are some dimensional object that has no intelligence whatsoever or whatever.
Right.
These things have a form of intelligence behind them. There's no question about that, especially in this case.
Well, you know, that's the thing, like you said, I think at the opening of the show, this is some of the best evidence we have to prove to the public. It may not, in fact, be the best evidence we have, but it's very difficult for anyone to say they're not under intelligent control when, in fact, they stop and wait for jets, the jets come and they lock on with their equipment to fire on the object, and the object takes off again. The object disappears when they come in close to it. It makes maneuvers to avoid aircraft. That's been repeatedly reported over and over again. There are just so many indications that something's going on. I personally don't know what it is. I'm very curious, but I think as our lead into the show says, you know, an intelligent discussion about this we think is necessary. And not only that, an intelligent look, and people like Carl Sagan and other scientists that say there's absolutely no scientific proof and so forth and so on, they just turn their back on this type of thing entirely. In fact, there was a press conference recently, and this was brought up to Carl Sagan in terms of the Belgian case. He ignored the question, and finally when the guy got through to him and said, well, what about it? The Belgians have made some very astounding statements about it and have some astounding proof. He said, well, it never appears in a legitimate scientific journal, and until it does, he won't consider it. Well, in fact, Carl Sagan explains things that he doesn't know anything about. That's really what he does. Instead of trying to find out about things that we don't know anything about and we want to know about. I think that should be the role of science. Go out and investigate it, tell us what it is. Don't not investigate it and try and explain it to us because you don't believe in it, which is hokum.
And that attitude is shared by many scientists, and that's actually what keeps that kind of information out of legitimate scientific journals.
I agree. The scientific community just is very close in it, and it's like a clique, more or less. And if you deviate from that clique, if you move out of the realm of that center, a lot of times you're scorned on by other scientific people.
Carl Sagan's own people, they did a study not so long ago where they gave the facts about UFOs to a group of astronomers, and they withheld them from the other half of the astronomers. Well, anyone that looked at the facts almost universally said, this is something we have to look into. There's something here. But the people that hadn't looked at the facts, that were at this convention, said, oh, it's a bunch of malarkey. Well, in fact, they'd never looked at the facts, you know, until they took part in this little study. So, you know, obviously, if they would stop and take a look, but there's grants at stake here and reputations and what have you. So it's understandable to some degree.
I think a lot of the people who maybe never heard about this Washington, D.C. sighting situation might be looking in and saying, like, well, if that's the case and it's so clear-cut, why do we not, as a majority of people in the United States, believe in UFOs and realize that there's something out there that's beyond our capabilities? And the simple answer, I think, is, and I'm not a psychologist, is that it's more comfortable to take the Air Force's excuse. It's more comfortable to believe that there's nothing out there, nothing to either fear or nothing out there more intelligent than us, and we're the only ones. And I think that's why it was so easy for the Air Force to pass off that ridiculous excuse of temperature inversion. I mean, it just doesn't fit. Brian, I saw a computer list you had the other day, which would probably go from the ceiling down to the floor. And when people talk and wonder about satellite verifications of UFOs, radar verification of UFOs, they think just a few cases. As I mentioned earlier in the show, over 2,000 since '47, possibly even a great deal more than that, really. But you've got a computer readout that you received from the Freedom of Information Act, and give us some details about that.
Right. Well, I had filed a request with the Naval Space Command in Virginia, and what I specifically asked for were unknown observations that they had had. And they notified me that they keep track of unknown observations for 60 days. So I was expecting maybe a record of 20 sightings. Well, in fact, this is what they gave me. We have, sorry about that, Pat.
Right.
We have nearly 4,000 observations just in the past 60 days. And then the next question, of course, is, well, do you ever identify these sightings? And they told me that 70% of them are identified. So we're still looking at roughly 1,000 observations every 60 days that are unidentified, as they call them, uncorrelated targets that they have on their scopes. And this is, for instance, the Navy, they use a system of radars that is strung out along the southern part of the United States. So again, just as we were mentioning earlier, if we have more than one radar picking up an object, chances are it really is there. And they have 6 different sites, and many of these observations are listed by all 6 sites. So it's definitely something there. What it is, that's what they can't figure out.
Let me try to clarify it for our viewers so that I understand also. Is this system that they're using, NORAD system or whatever that they're using, is it able to discontinue it being any of the space debris of over 3,000 pieces of space debris that we have out there? Is that saying that there's 30% that they know for a fact is not any of the 3,000 or so items that we have out there in space?
Well, that's you're partially right. They have over 7,000 orbital spacecraft and debris that they have cataloged.
Okay.
And this list right here is not any of those.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay.
So what you will get occasionally are small asteroids, different debris from various other spacecraft that, and even satellites that have fallen in from their orbit, and we haven't had the chance to identify them. And those 70% are identified. Okay. So there's 30% that remain unidentified. So that leaves you still a tremendous chunk.
1,200 some odd sightings.
Exactly.
Right.
NORAD, though, is different. NORAD has about 500,000 a year of unidentified sightings.
Right.
Now, how many they ultimately identify, I don't
know. With the complete space surveillance system, that's including Air Force, Navy, Army, and NORAD itself, they make some 45,000 observations a day. And they use satellites, they use ground radar, and we've even found out that they even use telescopes to get pictures of these objects. Which will be very important, I think, to the UFO community in determining what these objects really are.
There was a major sighting in Belgium, I believe it was 1989, somewhere around there. Can you give us a little background on that and set us up for our clip that we're going to have shortly?
Well, sure. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request.
Right.
And these specifically came from a Defense Intelligence Agency. And before I get into the Belgium sightings, there were a couple cases that had happened in the 70s and one in 1980. One that's still it's being looked into still today is something that happened in Iran in 1976. And what makes this case so unusual is that, again, we had radar tracking and we also had visual tracking. And what had happened was over Tehran, they had sighted some objects. And they had been receiving phone calls, the Iranian Air Force had, from various citizens saying that they're seeing these objects over Tehran. So they decided it was something to look into, and they sent up an F-4 to intercept any objects that they might have. And the F-4 sighted something on the radar scope. As they moved in, they saw this brilliant object, very bright. As the pilot moved in, he suddenly lost all communications with his aircraft, and he also lost all the instrumentation, all went out. So what he did, he turned around to go back to land, and as he turned around away from the object, communications were restored, his instrument panel regained its power. But he landed anyway because he figured it was just a malfunction with his jet. So the next thing they do, they send up another F-4 to check this out. This F-4 had the thing locked on target, and they moved in close to it. As he was moving in, another object appeared to come out from this object that they had on radar. As this object was moving towards it, it started gaining speed. Since the pilot had the object locked on radar, he attempted to fire an AIM, I believe it's called an AIM-9 missile, at the object. Right when he hit the button, it didn't work. Again, he loses all power of communications and instrumentation. At that point, the object then buzzed over the F-4, came back, went into the object, and dropped directly down and appeared to land. They made several passes and they couldn't find the object. And the next day they found ground traces of radiation, and it's just an amazing case that had happened. But I think we should jump to the Belgium case.
Right, very important case.
Right, here's the document that I received from Defense Intelligence Agency, and this again, we're talking, I believe a total of 6 radars had this, including the jet interceptors radars. Tracked this object, multiple ground sightings from police and military and civilians. I think it's a real important case to look into.
Back to UFO update. Pat, give us your comments on that. That's kind of unusual for a government to come out and acknowledge that there's something strange there.
Well, it's not only unusual, but I think you can point to a lot of interesting facts about this case that are actually parallel other cases The speed of the object measures the same as over Washington, D.C., rumored to be over 7,000 miles an hour. In fact, it's the same speed as they had in Holland, Michigan back in March.
Iran, too.
Iran.
1,200 miles, over 1,400 miles.
Right, and we've got, if anyone can tell me how an object can accelerate at 900, almost 1,000 miles an hour and stop dead before it hits the ground, which is what happened both in Belgium and in the Iranian case. I don't know if it was traveling quite that fast, but how do you stop an object like that? But there's quite a few things. I think one of the key thing is, and what the Belgians have said recently, there was a lot of publicity in Europe, a lot of skeptics saying, well, it's a secret American project and so on and so on. They've eliminated that entirely. First of all, it's against NATO treaties and everything else, and the Americans have eliminated it. But what the Belgians have said, and it's their conclusion, not ours, is that their best hypothesis is that this thing is extraterrestrial in nature. And that's the first time that anyone has come out and made that blanketed statement, at least about a radar case. The French have said it about a ground trace case to some degree. But
and that's the government's official position.
That's the government's position, and all the people that were misrepresenting it, the Philip classes, et cetera, of course they don't mention it. Right. But, and I don't think the American public's that aware of it, but it's in fact a startling thing.
I believe we have a phone call panel. Gerald?
Yes.
Go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, I was in the Air Force in 1957, and I reported a UFO, and they, of course, that I guess was under the Operation, I believe, Blue Book or whatever it was, and then they closed that out later on. Was you ever to get any information on that, of what the Air Force found out and what they had done over the years?
Well,
go ahead,
are you referring to Project Blue Book?
Yeah.
Okay, Project Blue Book, it's been discovered, was basically just public relations, and that the best sightings were actually going to different agencies. Project Blue Book was closed down in 1969 after the University of Colorado issued a, quote, scientific, end quote, report on UFOs. Funny thing about that report is that over 30% of the cases they investigated remained unexplained after their scientific study. However, nobody really looked at that report close enough to find that, and the newspapers just swallowed the conclusion that there was nothing here worth studying. And then, of course, the Air Force took that as their cue to close down Blue Book. Now, of course, what we would wonder, of course, that after all, the study itself had been under contract to the Air Force. So it almost sounds like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and it got the Air Force out of the sticky situation of having to deal with the public about UFOs.
In fact, we have memos that indicate the study was rigged from going in, and a lot of people quit, scientists who were associated. But Brian has done some freedom of information. Maybe you want to mention what you found out about Project Blue Book in Fort Belvoir.
Right. Well, one thing is the government's stance on UFOs is that they don't investigate them anymore. UFOs have never shown to be a threat of national security, and as we've seen, I would call the Washington D.C. Incident a threat to national security. And in fact, again, these are we have a 1990, a 1980, and a 1976. Blue Book was closed in 1969. So they indeed still are looking into the UFOs.
Have we answered your question, Gerald?
Yeah, and then I have another question.
Real quickly.
Okay, you saw this movie, Hangar 18.
Right.
That is supposed to be based on an actual incident with the Air Force.
We understand that. You're exactly correct in what you're saying.
Right, and I understand that was at Wright-Patterson Air Force.
That's correct, sir.
Have you ever been able to check that out to see any more?
Yeah, Hangar 18 is really just sort of one of those stories attached to the Roswell crash.
We appreciate your questions, Gerald.
All righty.
Thank you very kindly.
Thank you.
Pat, we've been getting a lot of calls since our last show, and we didn't do any shows over the summer, live shows, about your group, ASK. So can you briefly just give us an idea of how people can call you and become a member of ASK and serve with you in your organization?
Well, first of all, we do the show, basically. Everyone that's in ASK is here on the panel tonight, including some people in the control room. We're a nonprofit group. We investigate everything, across the board. But if you're interested in reporting a sighting or finding out more about us, you can call 860-4250, and be happy to help you in any way we can, either to join ASK or tell you what we do. And it's pretty involved, really.
That's 860-4250.
Right.
And Pat will give you all the information you need to have so you can join his organization. Terry, the terrific job you're doing on the newsletter. Tell us, though, what happened.
Okay. Well, my computer caught a virus, and before I had a chance to offload the mailing list, everything went black. So I urge anybody who has already asked for a newsletter to call me at 941-6912, and I'll get you back on the list, and I'll get you the newsletters out again. And anybody else that's interested in keeping up with what we're looking into, give me a call at 941-6912, and I'll add you to the list. Thank you.
Okay. Are we going to be able to do this in the future for a while, Terry? I don't mean to put you on the spot because
Sure.
I know it's very time-consuming on your part.
Right.
I hope people understand this. Terry spends all of this time, obviously gratis, in putting this all together, and right at the present time, I guess, are we still not having to charge for this?
At this moment, there's no charge, but
Okay.
with the cost coming out of pocket, it may become a subscription item soon.
I see. So you better hurry real quick
Sure.
and give him a call if you want to get on the list. Peggy, you started this support. I knew you and I were talked about it for years, and you've been meaning to start it for a long time ago. This is the only support group in the tri-state area I'm aware of. My wife, Peggy, I'm very proud of the fact that she is the president and founder of trying to get people together that have had UFO experiences so that they can relate with other people who've had similar experiences. Give us a little idea of how the group's doing and the date of the next meeting, of course.
Our next meeting will be held this coming Wednesday night at the Milford Library on Route 50. It starts at 6:30 and lasts till about 8 o'clock. And we have an average of about 20 people who come each month. And they discuss their sighting and their lost time and their experiences in an atmosphere where they know that people won't laugh at their experiences. They can share their feelings and experiences with people who have had similar. And we'll be happy to have anybody out there that's interested in coming to the group. Call us at 625-2613, and there's no charge for this. We just get together at the Milford Library once a month, and it's a way to release your feelings without worrying about being laughed at.
Pat, on your group, do we have any monthly meetings now that, I mean, there's nothing coming up, I guess, in the near future, or would you want to even say that?
Well, I wouldn't want to invite right now the general public in. We have a lot of projects going on, grants we're applying for, and a whole lot of freedom of information Brian's doing. We've got so many irons in the fire right now, the TV show and so forth and so on, the newsletter and
What do you think the chances are of getting a grant? I know you've recently discussed that
well,
with the
I
Mutual
think they're
UFO
good.
Network.
You know, we have an excellent reputation, primarily thanks to Jerry, actually. He's done some tremendous investigations into Gulf Breeze and did some work for the movie Fire in the Sky and other things. And we've done some other things, Terry and I, and you and Terry, and so we're on publishing articles in magazines and what have you. So people are looking to us, and we have an axe to grind, I guess, but we're try to be as neutral about things as we can.
I think we've made it very clear to people here tonight that we're very much in support of radar, really showing people out there that we're dealing with something that really deserves an investigation. But one thing, gentlemen, we forgot tonight, and we've promised people this every time we have a show. We need from you, Pat, an update on the GAO investigation into Roswell, because something unusual just happened in the past month or so they might be interested in.
Well, you know, if you're talking about the Air Force report,
right.
You know, the Air Force report is riddled with inconsistencies and mistakes. It's not the final word. The GAO is coming out with something else. And let me say this, what they are telling you is, in fact, they lied to you in 1947. They had a weather balloon in Roger Ramey's office, General Roger Ramey, and they substituted it for an identical weather balloon, only they're calling it Project Mogul now. We've been aware of Project Mogul for years, examined it thoroughly, and if we had a half an hour, I could tell the people why it's totally ludicrous, and it's been dismissed by just about anyone with any common sense for a long, long time. But they have not produced, which is what this is all about, the documentation. They have documents about every truck they drove and every little weather balloon they recovered, but we don't have any documentation about Roswell, and that's what the GAO wanted, and that's what the Air Force has failed to produce, again, any documentation. And I could go on about these are off-the-shelf weather balloons and so on and so on. I wish we had the time because it's an interesting thing, but we just don't have it.
Isn't it interesting, though, that if nothing else that we get out of this GEO investigation, and that might be all we get,
Right.
we've at least got the government to admit that the picture with Marcel was a setup.
It was a setup, but what they're saying is
I know.
it's
I
the
understand
same
what
balloon,
they're saying,
you know.
but they're still saying that that was not the actual
it's
material.
the temperature inversion of the
right.
Roswell case.
It was
just
not the actual
absolutely
material, though, is what they're saying.
No, and what they're trying to say to you in simple terms for anyone out there, they're trying to say that people that had degrees in nuclear physics, people that were trained in air material command, airplane accidents, other people, generals, colonels, captains, on down the line couldn't identify balsa wood and couldn't identify foil, and that's totally ludicrous. It's so ludicrous. My 5-year-old daughter could identify it. We were going to do a thing and bring some balsa wood on, but I wouldn't want to insult the intelligence of the people out there. But they're doing it right now through the Air Force report. So anyone that wants to think about it for a second, tell me who couldn't identify those things. I don't know who that person is.
I see. Well, again, I want to thank the panel tonight. We've come to the end of our hour again. The time just seems to fly by. But I want to thank our audience out there for watching tonight, and I hope you understand where we're coming from. We feel this needs a further investigation. Radar has shown us some convincing information that we need to deal with and need to look at and not put it under the rug. I certainly want to thank our producer, Bob. I want to thank our director, Glenn. I want to thank Zach in the control room and all the fine people out here on the floor manning the cameras. And we really appreciate all these people's work. We hope you'll watch us again next month. We'll be on the first Thursday of next month, 8 to 9 o'clock in the evening. I'd like to leave you with this final thought. Obviously, radar has shown us the best evidence possible that UFOs are not manufactured on this planet. For that reason alone, because of the 7,300 miles per hour, because of the fact that UFOs have been seen to go 1,200 miles in one direction, reverse course in 1 second, for that reason alone, the scientific community should take a look at UFOs, but they don't. I'd like to read you this little quote, a little saying, and that is, if it looks like if it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it sounds like a duck, that means it's a duck. And maybe, just maybe, if our scientific community uses that philosophy when they investigate UFOs, just maybe, we'll find the answer to the UFO phenomenon. Just maybe. I want to thank the panel, and for myself, thank all of you for watching, and hopefully all your contacts will be good ones. Thank you.